Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Leanne Ward. I am a pediatric endocrinologist, osteologist at the University of Ottawa and the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. I'm a clinician scientist there as well, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this webinar this evening featuring physical activity and osteogenesis imperfecta, and just delighted to work with this vibrant, dynamic community that is the Canadian Osteogenesis Imperfecta Society. I'm just going to share my screen to go through a few little introductory slides. So the webinar this evening is part of the 2024 Triple CBH and CARDS, or Canadian Alliance for Rare Disorders of the Skeleton, virtual series. Triple CBH is an initiative to empower health professionals in the care of individuals with rare bone disorders, and CARDS is a patient advocacy affiliate that seeks to empower, educate, and engage with the patient community. And we're just thrilled this evening to be collaborating with the Canadian Osteogenesis Imperfecta Society, who I said is very dynamic and vibrant, and really excited to hear their voice this evening. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather this evening is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin people have lived on this land since time immemorial, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. So indeed, we're talking about physical activity in OI this evening. Of course, notionally, we all think about the importance of fitness, but when one has a bone fragility condition, that presents unique discussion points. And so we're happy to dig into this evening. The COIS has specifically tagged this topic, and we've been happy to put together a program that's led by the patient voice. This evening, you'll hear from Jacinta White, the president and chair of the Canadian Osteogenesis Imperfecta Society. Very busy individual, and we're so thrilled that Jacinta is able to patch in with us this evening. And then we'll be featuring individuals from the OI community who'll be sharing their journeys and their experiences with physical activity in osteogenesis imperfecta: Rachel White, Sarah Kamal, and Courtney Werner, and I'll introduce them more formally later. Delighted to work with my co-chair this evening, friend and colleague, Dr. Anne-Marie Sprocki, but affectionately known as Annie. She is an associate professor in pediatrics and division director of pediatric endocrinology at McGill University Health Center and the co-medical director of the preoperative clinic at the very well-known OI Center that is the Shriners Hospital for Children in Montreal. And then we're delighted to hear from two experts in physical activity in OI from the health professional perspective. So we have short keynote addresses followed by an Ask Me Anything session. The first keynote will be by Corinne Mercier, who's a physiotherapist at the Shriners in Montreal. And our second keynote speaker is Jess Buffam, who's a physiotherapist who works with us at the CHEO Research Institute and works to help navigate physical therapy for individuals with OI and engage them with practitioners in the community. We are recording this event because we like to post it on our website at bonescanada.org, so people who couldn't attend can listen to the recording after the event. However, if there's anything that any member of the community or any health professional would like to see edited out before we formally post on the website, we're very happy to do that. You just have to be in touch with me. My email is there, and tell me what you'd like removed, and I'm happy to remove anything that you wish before the final recording is posted. To participate, you can put a comment in the chat. You can put up your hand and speak, open mic, and you're also welcome just to sit back and listen. There's absolutely no pressure to speak. You may be in a zone where you're just happy to listen to the dialogue this evening. So whatever works for you works for us. We certainly do hope that we create an inviting and warm atmosphere for you tonight. We really want to talk, dialogue, listen, reflect, hear each other out, but recognize that some people just like to listen, and that's okay. I'm grateful to the Triple CBH and Card Steering Committee who support the programs that are coming out of these two initiatives, including Dr. Sprocky, as I mentioned earlier. And Dr. Nazrin Khan is also here with us this evening, and she has helped us put this webinar together along with her colleagues who work with my group. The webinar typically winds down around 8:15-ish, and then afterwards we'll come off recording and have a little catch up with the community, a catch up over virtual coffee, if you will. And so you're welcome to stay and just get to know the people that are on the call and chat and catch up and build some connections and bridges through the COIS and the cards individuals. And so with that, I wish you a wonderful webinar, and I will turn it over now to Jacinta to say a few words on behalf of the COIS.
Thanks, Leanne, and thanks everybody for joining us this evening. As Leanne says, my name is Jacinta Bryant. I'm the president and chair of the COIS, and we're working hard together with the community to reactivate the COIS to make it a vibrant and representative organization for the OI community, not just in Canada, but across North America. And we call it OI Without Borders. On behalf of COIS, I want to thank and acknowledge the work of Leanne, Dr. Ward, and the team and the CARD initiative for their continued support and collaboration with the COIS. It takes a lot to pull these together. We wouldn't be able to do this on our own, and the topics are meaningful to our community and in fact have been raised by them in the past. So the fact that we get that support from Dr. Ward and the CARD team is really, really impactful to our community. So really appreciate that as well. These webinars are also an opportunity for us to engage with the OI community across Canada to assist our philosophy of focusing on what we call OI can. So it's not about what we can't do, it's what we can do. So we have on our website what we call the OI can corner, etc., where we interview and engage with community members, like we talked about Kristen Hayes, who was our COIS ambassador, who can actually guide people through activities and a more fulfilled life while they navigate the world with OI. OI can is really important for us to keep our community better informed, understand the fact that we can build stronger bodies, and also that stronger body can also help us build stronger minds and lead healthier lives. So by doing what we can make life better for everybody. I'm really proud tonight that we're joined by Sarah Kamal, who is on the panel as she also has a board role as the COIS secretary. So it's really important that we have that representation. And she is also the mother, Sophia, who is the COIS junior ambassador. So she's one of those feisty little OI people who actually keeps us on our toes. And then also Courtney, who's also a mom and a health professional, who also has a feisty 4-year-old. And I have my own feisty 28-year-old, Rachel White, who's also on the panel today. So I think you'll enjoy the conversation with them. And again, unfortunately, Kristen Hayes couldn't join us this evening, so she sends her apologies. This topic was chosen as physical activity, not only to build stronger bodies, but it is also to assist mental health and well-being. And it's important, in particularly for our community, when we do get a number of physical setbacks, that there is things we can do to help us move along. I'm really appreciate as well the fact that Corinne from the Shriners is here, and also Jessica as well from CHIO to be our keynote speakers, because the engagement of the health professionals are really important in terms of giving us guidance as to what we can do and to translate some of the complex issues into very practical terms as well. So really appreciate you giving up your time to do that as well. Regrettably, I do have to leave because I am hosting a dinner, which I hear the bagpipes are going downstairs, so clearly started. But anyway, I'm not going to be doing a jig or anything, but I don't know if that's to do with, we have every mayor in the Greater Toronto area at this dinner tonight. The head table is 42 people, so they take ages to load in, which is perfect for me. But again, I'd like to apologise for not being able to be here for the whole evening, and I look forward to hearing the recording. And just want to thank you all again for joining us this evening. It's very much appreciated. So Leanne, with that, I'll hand over to you and I'll sign off. So thank you very much, everybody. And Sarah, we're in your hands from COIS, right? Bye-bye. Bye, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Jacinta. Totally understand that you need to leave. I love this play on "Oh, I Can," which to me, I hear as Canada, but also ca capacity and capability. So I think that's really great, and appreciate Jacinta's enthusiasm for this evening's webinar. So with that, I'm going to open it up now to members of the community who are going to share their experiences with physical activity in osteogenesis imperfecta. Our first speaker is Rachel White. As Jacinta said, this is Jacinta's daughter. Rachel is 28, living in Toronto. She was diagnosed with OI type 4 at 18 weeks of age and was treated at the Shriners Hospital in Montreal for most of her life. She's now a patient of Dr. Angela Chung at Toronto General Hospital, and Dr. Chung has been one of our keynote speakers here as part of the CARDS program. Rachel has experienced, you said only 28 fractures.
Only 28.
I know.
That's pretty lucky. I can't complain.
Amazing optimism and a positive attitude. I love it. And with the majority of your fractures being before the age of 10, you try to be as active as possible, lifting weights in the gym multiple times a week and going on walks or playing tennis when your legs allow you to do so. You're currently a business owner focusing on helping women feel safe in their daily lives, and you also work in the automotive industry. So Rachel, thank you so much for being here this evening and sharing with us your thoughts. We're happy to listen out.
My pleasure. Hi, everyone. As Leanne said, my name is Rachel, and I am 28. I have found, I guess we're talking about physical activity. So I think the number one thing that I found through physical activity and specifically weightlifting is it was a really good form of exercise for me that was low impact, in the sense that as I've aged, I've noticed specifically that jumping is harder for me, running is harder for me, and I have more days than not where my stamina is definitely limited. So I have found that through weightlifting, not only physically, but mentally, it helps me feel, like I'm keeping up with my friends and I'm, making sure my body is healthy. But I've also noticed with my bone density, it has dramatically helped. I believe I started lifting weights around 2015. And when I did start, Angela actually saw a significant difference in my bone density. So there was a significant increase. And surprisingly, I was experiencing a lot less bone pain when I was being more consistent with my weightlifting. In order to keep my cardio up, sometimes I found that difficult. I found like low impact things like the elliptical and sometimes the Stairmaster, depending on how my bones were feeling, were always a really good way to make sure that not only I'm working on my muscles, but I'm also working on my cardiovascular, which is important for people with OI because sometimes we have decreased lung function as we age because there's changes to those connective tissues in our body. In regards to being a child or a teenager, I couldn't do things like softball, baseball, basketball, all those typical sports that a lot of high school kids or middle school kids play. But I did find myself, I was on the swim team. So I was doing a lot of those impact sports, low impact sports. So swim team, tennis, I found was actually pretty good for me. I obviously had to be careful with the running aspect and not being too jerky on my legs. But I found tennis, badminton, and archery. I quite enjoyed archery, which is definitely a sport that a lot of people don't think of, but it's definitely one of the more accessible sports. And the company that would come into my high school, actually, they would have different levels of bow, because bow strength, sometimes with OI patients, your bones aren't as strong. So it's more difficult for you to pull back a heavier like bow and arrow. So they would have different types depending on your strength and also the severity of your bone condition. But yeah, I find it's weird. Like as a child, I could jump rope, I could run a lot more, I could play those kinds of I shouldn't say play. I could contribute to those kinds of activities with my friends in school. And now that I'm old, it's like I can't do those things, which I find kind of interesting. But I do find ways to keep myself active, going on walks and hikes I do quite enjoy. But again, depending on how my bone pain is, that period of time. Sometimes I can't do that for months at a time. But that's when I really turned to weightlifting. And I noticed through doing that consistently, my stamina increases, and I'm able to get back to those activities that I do enjoy with my friends. So. Oh, you're muted still.
Thank you. I think I'd learn after all these years. Really great to hear your perspective on this. Sounds like you keep yourself very active indeed. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about your weight training. So how did you get into it? Did you work with a physiotherapist to develop a weight training program, or did you use a personal trainer at a club? Do you do it at home in your basement, or do you go to a club? How do you actually implement weight training in your life?
So I'm a member at Good Life, and I started with a personal trainer, and I actually started with a personal trainer that specialized in geriatric clients. So, they're more cognizant of your form and how much weight you're lifting, because as we know, a lot of elderly people do develop conditions like osteoporosis. So I thought that was a good leeway to get into it, because I would have a trainer who was knowledgeable, who would make sure that I wouldn't get injured, and would be more careful. And so once I learned things from my personal trainer, I stepped back, because obviously personal training is very expensive. I stepped back and I kind of just went on my own way once I had gained the proper knowledge with form and how much weight I should be lifting and how certain exercises should be feeling to make sure that I'm doing them correctly. I do a little bit at home when I'm lazy and I don't want to go to the gym. But I definitely would recommend something like a personal trainer. And even there's some community centers I know, because obviously personal training is not accessible for everybody because it is quite expensive, but there's some community centers as well that offer group classes for elderly individuals, like my neighbors. And they said there's a few younger people who actually attend who have some forms of disabilities and that kind of thing. And that's a cheaper way.
Yeah, it makes sense to link up with a health professional to set the program and have some supervision as you're getting your wings. Annie?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Rachel, for sharing your story. I was curious if you thought that perhaps weight training could have been started in your teenage years. I know a lot of the teenagers now are getting into weightlifting and hitting the gym, males and females. And I'm just wondering your thoughts, if that was as trendy when you were younger, if that's something you wish you had started earlier, and if it's something you would recommend to your younger self.
It's definitely something I would have recommended to my younger self. It wasn't as big of a thing, I feel, when I was that age. I actually sometimes, instead of gym class, when I couldn't participate in certain activities, like when sometimes they'd go out and play football and that kind of thing, and I would go into the gym and I didn't know what I was doing though, but I would just fool around or do cardio. But no, I was definitely capable of doing it when I was a teenager. It never crossed my mind, if I'm being honest with you. So I definitely would recommend it for teenagers, and especially with puberty and changes in your bone density, it's something that will dramatically help, and it will decrease your fracture risk, I find, if you're doing it carefully enough.
Great. Thank you. Does anybody from the community have any questions or any comments or any reflections on what Rachel has shared with us this evening?
Just wondering, Rachel, have you ever experienced a fracture while you've been weightlifting?
No. I will say though, I have had stress fractures in my tibia, which could have been caused by the weightlifting. But I found when I was experiencing that kind of thing, I just wouldn't do legs. I would just focus solely on upper body. But then again, I don't know if that's whatever actually caused the fracture. That was just the guess of Angela and myself, because I wasn't doing any other physical activity. I hadn't fallen, I hadn't tripped, I hadn't done anything. So I would say maybe stress fracture here and there, but I would just tailor my workout plan accordingly.
And Rachel, I don't know about Toronto, but I know in Montreal, pickleball is becoming very popular. Is that something that you would be interested in engaging in?
Maybe. I've never tried pickleball. I did a tennis clinic last winter. I had a stress fracture in my foot though, so I was wearing a boot. So it was a little difficult, But I did find even in that situation, running, well, minus the boot, let's ignore that part. But running in general, because it's harder for me now, you know, I just spoke to the instructor and I was like, listen, like doing those jerky movements and running is kind of difficult for me due to my bone condition. And they were totally cool with it. They were like, no problem. And he usually paired me up with someone who was happy doing all the running. So I would just stand at the front kind of and move a little bit, which was nice. But I don't know, maybe I'll take up pickleball. I don't know. We'll see.
Annie, I've also heard it's all the rage that people are going on pickleball conferences and retreats and vacations and stuff.
That's crazy.
Yeah, looks fun.
Well, thank you, Rachel. We're off to a great start with, really great perspectives on what you've carried out over your adult life and how you would think about perhaps what you would recommend to teenagers. So thanks for that.
No problem.
Next is Sarah Kamal. So Sarah lives in Toronto, Ontario, and is the Vice President of Development on the Canadian OI Society Board. She's a busy mother of 3 and comes from a marketing background professionally. After her youngest child was diagnosed with severe OI, the knowledge and support she received from the OI community was invaluable. That's really nice to hear, Sarah. And she chose to volunteer on the COI's board as a way to give back to the OI community. So Sarah, thanks for coming to the webinar. You're a frequent flyer at our webinars, and we always enjoy hearing from you. So please have the floor.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the nice intro. So my daughter Sophia is 11 and she has type 3 severe OI. And when I say she's severe, she is pretty severe. She's fully non-ambulatory. She has never walked independently or kind of gained the ability to transfer at this point. So she does depend on me a lot. She breaks quite frequently and even spontaneously, quite a bit spontaneously in the past few years, where she'll just be sitting doing nothing and feel a rib pop or a tibia break. So physical activity has always been challenging. Ever since she was a baby, we've kind of been drawn to the water with her because it seems to be, the easiest thing and the least amount of stress put on her body. So when she was a baby, we got kind of a big inflatable tub that we could use in the house. It took a lot of hot water to fill, but she used to do that when she was little. And then as she got older, I would take her to the public pool. I got her involved in one-on-one swimming lessons, which were kind of terrifying, but I would just explain to the instructor, and they would kind of create a little barrier around her so kids wouldn't bump into her, kick her, and she'd be far enough away from the wall that she wouldn't be hitting it. And she really enjoyed that. And then when she was about 6, at one of her swimming lessons, she actually got recruited by a synchronized swimming team, and they asked if she would consider joining the adapted synchronized swimming team. So she was very keen to do that because she always talked about wanting to be a ballerina. When she grew up, this was her thing. She wanted to be a ballerina, and so then we kind of spun that into, well, how about being a water ballerina? Would you be interested in being a water ballerina? And she liked that a lot. So she's been swimming competitively with synchronized swimming since she was 6. It was kind of a slow start, and she's really taken off now. It fills a lot of time. There's a lot of competitions. The winters are pretty busy. She travels a lot now. She has an opportunity to swim on the Canadian national team this year, and potentially go to the States to make a play to get the synchronized swimming, which is now called artistic swimming, added to the 2028 Paralympics, because it's up to the hosting country, and the US and LA apparently have an interest in that. And so that would be a really big thing for the adapted artistic swimming community. Now, she does have a lot of setbacks with it. She swims a lot with fractures. If it's something mild, she can usually get through it. I mean, her legs are all rotted. And so she has, when she has a fracture in her, her femur or tibia with the rod in place, usually after, the first little while, she can continue swimming. She swims often with broken ribs, and surprisingly, that doesn't really hurt in the water as much. I don't know if it's something about the buoyancy, but they don't hurt as much in the water. Fingers and toes are constant. She broke both of her feet 2 nights ago at synchro, just kind of kicking. But it gives her something to aspire to. She gets a little down when she gets fractures, but then she's happy to get back in the water. When she first kind of got into competitive and was swimming several hours a week, we actually saw a decrease in her scoliosis, because she does have quite severe scoliosis. And her surgeon at Shriners actually attributed it to the synchronized swimming, just because it's so much core work, because she really is. She's in deep water constantly, holding her body upside down, doing a lot of different movements. And he said all those kind of little muscles like around the spine and through the core, he thinks did help. I mean, I think it definitely does make her stronger. She's been going through a rough patch right now, and I think it's just kind of the pre-puberty years, and I see it happen with a lot of friends her age these years, where the fractures do increase. But we try to work through it, and even we attended the National OI conference this summer in Omaha, Nebraska, and something that really resonated with me is they said with severe OI, lack of movement, when you have lack of movement, it can almost mimic like a severe muscular dystrophy, because the muscles will just kind of seize. And I noticed that happening with her, and I was kind of letting her not be active and just kind of lay still. She had a fracture, her hip was hurting or kind of whatnot. And, she'd be on the couch for days, and then other things would start seizing up, and it would lead to other problems. And so there's been a bit of tough love since then, where I kind of force her to go in the pool. Like if she's not in excruciating pain, and I tell her, you can just lay in the pool. You don't have to do anything. We have a swim spa at home. That was something we were fortunate enough to be able to get during COVID. And so we keep it warm. She goes in year round. She's happy to go in when it's -30, and she makes little snowmen around the edge of the pool. And I would force her to go in, and just lying in the pool would then turn into like eventually her moving, the sore limbs and moving around more. And then by the end of it, after a couple of hours in the pool, she would feel better. So I do think it has a huge benefit. And even with the mental health component, it kind of gives her thing where she feels, left out a lot. There are other wheelchair users at her school and kids with disabilities, none with OI. But what I feel sometimes is that we almost kind of have like the double whammy, because she is non-ambulatory, full-time wheelchair user, but you also throw the fragility on top of that. So lots of things that are designed for maybe wheelchair users don't work with OI, and she can't do wheelchair basketball because the basketball is too heavy, and she can't do wheelchair volleyball, and she can't really swing a racket. So all of those things that are designed to go along with, or it's skiing. She has a friend that does the skiing, but the mom told me she does tip over once in a while, the sledge skiing. And I said, well, that's no good. She would break her arm in an instant. So that can be frustrating for her. So with swimming, I feel like she kind of really found her thing. And, she has sometimes where, she can't do it, or she can't participate in a competition if her fractures are bad enough at that time. But it gives her confidence and lets her build friendships. And then she feels, like an athlete too. Like she has one brother that's very competitive in soccer, and she compares herself and says she's an athlete just like him, and it's true. So water for us has been her thing, and something I highly recommend for severe OI, when you feel like you don't kind of have a lot of options for physical activity.
Wow, what an amazing story. Artistic swimming. And, when I think about the few times I've had to tread water for a prolonged period, I can only imagine what it does, as you say, to building your core and your back muscles and your arms and your legs to be doing artistic swimming and with osteogenesis imperfecta. I know Jess Buffam on the call this evening is an expert in hydrotherapy. So here, Jess, we have a situation where, an individual has spent time in the pool and then progressed in their skills to the point that they're really quite elite at their skill. So that's really an amazing story. At the same time, you spoke to the challenges, how Sophie even fractured just in the water, just treading water, if I understood you correctly, right? So very, very challenging indeed, but an amazing story, Sarah, and thanks for sharing that. Annie, do you have any reflections on anything that you heard this evening?
Yeah, no, it's very inspiring. Just wondering, what about when you go to the ocean? So does she ever also go into the ocean where there could be waves, and do you worry about that?
Yeah, she does. She loves the ocean. She loves any body of water, and she's fearless. The
That's
one thing in the
fantastic.
ocean is kind of kind of where the surf hits in the shallow water, where she can just kind of weight bear a little bit. She's heard herself doing that a couple of times, just because, she's kind of jumping with the waves and it ends up kind of twisting a foot or whatnot. So then we tend to get to a bit deeper water where she can just kind of be buoyant. And our other kind of challenge as she gets older is just actually getting her down to the beach with accessibility. Like, I love when beaches have that full kind of accessible boardwalk that will go right down to the water, because, sand is not our friend with the wheelchair, and I can't just kind of pick her up and carry her like I used to be able to when she was younger. But yeah, she loves lakes, she loves oceans, she loves swimming, and I think she loves the freedom of movement with swimming. I think in her daily life she can sometimes be a bit frustrated that she doesn't have kind of full control over like her movement or what she necessarily wants to do, or just kind of faces barriers within her wheelchair, that she can't always go where her friends are going, or to the playground, or on the mulch or uneven terrain. But in the water, it levels the playing field, and she can do what everyone else is doing. And I think she really enjoys that.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think we'll hear more about hydrotherapy later and water-based exercise, and it's just a really inspiring story, as you said, Annie. Does anybody from the community have any reflections on what Sarah has shared this evening, or any questions for Sarah about her experience with her daughter? Okay. All right. Well, with that, we'll move on to our third speaker from the community, Courtney Werner. Dr. Courtney Werner is a chiropractor and mother to a 4-year-old girl with OI type 3. Courtney attended University of Toronto and did her graduate studies at Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College, where she completed her research project in ankylosing spondylitis. Following this, she worked in spinal stenosis research with Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto before moving to Ottawa, and she currently works in clinical practice and owns a multidisciplinary health clinic. She uses her knowledge of research, fitness, and spinal health to inform the care she gives her daughter, and to help other parents advocate for their children, just as you're doing this evening, Courtney. When she's not busy working or being managed by an assertive 4-year-old, I love that. She enjoys walking her dog, Pilates, and reading. And it sounds like you take some time for yourself, Courtney, with Pilates, and important that the caregivers also take time to exercise and be fit, and it sounds like you're able to weave that in. So, Courtney, welcome this evening, and thank you for sharing your story.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I would first say that Dr. Ward has been Cece's endocrinologist since she was like, I don't know, 13 hours old or something like that. So we've been well supported from the beginning. And now when she has a fracture, Dr. Ward is usually the first call. Sarah Kamal is the first text. So I have a very good support network in this community, and I'm very, very thankful for that. So I will say my formal education was woefully inadequate when it came to OI. I think we touched on it in radiology, and kind of like, these are fragile people, they're none of your business. Like, if you see clinical signs and there's some stuff going on, refer them out. There's nothing you can do for them. But as I have kind of gone on in practice, and I started in spinal stenosis research, which was we were geriatric specific in my case. So there's a lot of fragility issues with seniors, and there's kind of a lot of generalized information I can bring to my daughter's care and the OI community. But when I had my daughter and was looking for information specifically on rehab and exercise and stuff like that, I did what comes naturally to me, and I looked to the literature and the research. And as I'm sure the presenters on this panel know, there isn't a lot for OI, specifically for the more severe spectrums of OI. So I had to kind of go back to what do I know in general is true for health, and then kind of break it down to what makes sense for OI. And I'll touch on Dr. Ward's point that I take time to exercise. And this is, you know, sorry to the moms on the call, children will take their cues usually from their parents on the kind of activity and how active they are. And research has specifically shown that an active mother specifically is more likely to have active children that don't have as many problems with weight management and other related health issues later in life. So we have to kind of lead from us. And I know we have really, really busy lives and a lot of things going on. But we have to kind of practice what we preach. And if we want them to be active, we have to show them that activity is part of our everyday life. It has to be for us too. So when I think about physical activities for kids, the general guidelines are that children need like 60 minutes of moderate vigorous activity a day. And we know that the benefits from that, the one the society kind of puts out the most, weight management, sure. But there's also developing cardiovascular fitness, general strength, and bone density. It also can lower the risk of substance abuse and other addiction problems later in life. So active kids generally have less problems with this later on. This that may be particularly relevant to kids that maybe have more challenges than a lot of the population that we think about these kinds of things. So those are all benefits of fitness. And then I kind of thought about the nerdy side of things. And there is a German doctor from the 1800s, and his name is Julius Wolff. I think Julius, but Wolff anyways. And he kind of observed that when you put demands on a bone, it will strengthen to kind of try and meet the demand. So this is called Wolff's Law. We still talk about it in healthcare today, that when we want a bone to be stronger, we have to demand more of it. So increased loading kind of leads to a stronger bone to resist the load. Decreased loading has the opposite effect, right? So if we don't demand something of bone, we lose bone density. And that's kind of just generally true for all of us. And I'm not an endocrinologist, but I think that that would be true for any bone, even if it is a bone that has collagen issues. So the caveat with our OI community is, or any fragile community, so someone who has osteopenia or osteoporosis, loading bone has to be done in a kind of progressive, careful manner. When we kind of do too much is when we have the risk of those insufficiency or fragility fractures. So you can't just be like, I think I'm gonna squat 100 pounds today. This is gonna really do a good job for my bones, right? So it's about kind of modulating what is reasonable for that patient and for that individual, and kind of slowly building up to it. So when we talk about the OI population, for me, building bone density means lifting heavier things and doing that repeatedly, weight bearing, kind of trying to do that. For the OI community, it might be weight bearing, depending on the severity and the fragility, weight bearing might be that bone density building exercise. It might be lifting weights. It might be lifting lighter weights or heavier weights or going for walks, but just finding a way that you can kind of increase resistance on those bones. When we are talking about like the pediatric population, so we're typically building our peak bone density by age 30, but in women, it tends to be 90% kind of by like 18, and men, it's about 90% by age 20, as far as I can remember. Maybe Dr. Ward can correct me on this. So we really have an important opportunity to build bone density before we reach skeletal maturity. So before we reach adulthood is when, if we're encouraging those loading activities and those bone density increasing activities, we have the biggest opportunity to make changes for our kids, if they're kids, when they're still doing it. Not that it is not helpful at all times, it totally is. But it's specifically important in those adolescent years to kind of encourage that. So some of you on the call will know my daughter, Cece. You can't get her to do anything that she doesn't specifically want to do. So with a grain of salt, you can have all the good intentions in the world, and everyone's still an individual and it's going to do what they want to do. Cece does enjoy swimming. She does a swim program every Thursday for children with disabilities, and she loves that. She's missed quite a few. This year specifically, she's had a lot of fractures and surgeries and things like that going on. But when she's able to get in the pool and do that, she really does enjoy going in the water. She also does Pilates and yoga with me. She does modified yoga almost every morning with me. And this is kind of bringing back to what Sarah said. Core strength is really important for all of us. In my general practice, like now I'm in private practice, I see everybody. When someone's coming in with low back pain, we evaluate the core. How is their core? Often we send them out for pelvic floor kind of evaluation as well, but how is the core? A strong core is key to spinal stability and to reducing back pain in general. There is nothing that you can do in a physio or chiro or massage therapist's office that is as helpful as having a strong and stable core for yourself when it comes to back pain. And that's also a big problem in the OI community as well, right? Back pain is significant. I also check my patients with back pain, and specifically my patients who are full-time wheelchair users. I check hip flexors and I check glute strength. Glute is kind of the round part of the bum. Hip flexors are kind of the front of the hip that brings the knee up into that seated position. It's really common in OI or any wheelchair user specifically, that when you spend a lot of time sitting, you can get pain on the front of the hip flexors. You can get lack of flexibility there. And we can get weakness in the glutes. So if I have kind of anything that I take away from my patients who may be wheelchair users who are doing their own transfers, we do check glute strength and we work on that. Working on our glutes and kind of the posterior, the back side of our legs can be really protective of fall risk. So if we have strong muscle, it can, this is true in geriatrics as well, like prevent or help prevent unnecessary falls. So this is all stuff that is in my head when I'm trying to encourage my daughter to do physical activity. And she's pretty into the yoga and Pilates, I'll be honest. But working on core, working on stretching the front of the hips, working on glute strength, and working on just loading the bones. And in her case, she has some use of the walker with pelvic support. It's been really on and off over the last year because of fractures and discomfort and other things like that that's going on. She's frequently in a dynamic stander because she does not like to be still. So it's a stander with big wheels on it. So loading those bones looks differently for everyone. And for her, it's kind of small incremental ways of getting active. And I'm sure as she gets older, she'll tell me exactly what she wants to do and doesn't want to do. Yeah, I think that's all I have.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, no, it's so inspiring. Your patients are so lucky to have you with all that knowledge about the different muscular groups and how to strengthen one muscle group to compensate for some challenges with others. Another thing that's taking over Montreal is puppy yoga. So I don't know if that's something that you can maybe incorporate into your practice, but I think it'll make it fun for Cece and perhaps some other children. But I don't know if you've seen that at all, puppy yoga, where you can do yoga and then they literally release a whole bunch of puppies, and that could also help perhaps with mental health too, and make maybe some of the physical activity more enjoyable.
It would for me for sure. We always have dogs roaming around our house while we're doing yoga, so I'm kind of part of it here already.
That's wonderful. And, I couldn't agree more that example is the best teacher as a parent, right? And I think it's wonderful you're role modeling Pilates and yoga, and you're doing it together, which is mom and daughter time. And no doubt she's incorporating this into her lifestyle as a value, and hopefully she'll carry that through her teen years and her young adult years. And she's obviously got a very capable mom when it comes to anatomy and physiology, and so Cece's very lucky to have you in that regard. Super. Any comments from the community about anything that you want to reflect on that Courtney shared this evening? All right. Well, thank you so much, Courtney, for sharing that. And we'll move now into our keynote speakers. So we've got two speakers this evening who are actively working with the rare bone disease community, so have unique perspectives as well. And they've prepared some material to teach us and also to stimulate some discussion. So our first speaker is Corinne Mercier, or Mercier, I guess, because you're from Montreal. Corinne graduated from the University of Montreal in 2004. She's been working at the Shriners for Children Canada for almost 20 years, dedicating the majority of her practice to working with children with OI and their families. So amazing, chiseled expertise in this space. She has a very holistic approach to her patients and has a special interest in promoting active lifestyles, adapted sports, and school inclusion. Over the years, she's met hundreds of families with children with OI and has participated in clinical research projects and given numerous presentations on OI internationally to healthcare professionals, patients, and their families. So, Corinne, we're very lucky to have you this evening and welcome you. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here tonight. A lot of things that I was planning to say tonight have been said already, so this is great. I did prepare a little PowerPoint presentation, but don't worry, it's nothing too formal. So I'm just going to open it now. I'm going to share my screen. So do you see what I'm sharing? And now.
Yes, very cute opening slide. I love the bear with the little fez.
Okay. Okay, so I think it's good. Okay, so I was, so thank you for inviting me. I was given the pretty challenging task to talk about physical activity in children with OI in 10, 15 minutes. So I'll try to summarize what is it that I've learned over the years, reading on physical activity and OI, but especially working with children with OI. I work at the Shriners Hospital in Montreal. Even though it's a pretty small hospital, we have a huge population of children with OI coming for treatment, and they come from all around the world. And now let's dig into the subject. So Courtney, as you said, the Wolff's Law. So we know that physical activity is good for the muscles, it's good for the heart, it's good for emotional well-being, it's good for flexibility, balance, but sometimes we don't talk that physical activity is good for bone health as well, as you mentioned, Courtney. So all the time I explain to the families that when you exercise, especially when you do some strengthening exercises, you strengthen your muscles, but you strengthen your bones as well. So I tell the kids, when you exercise, your bones are getting stronger as well. There's really a positive correlation between muscle strength and bone strength. That's good for everybody, including if you have OI. So that brings me to share our philosophy of care in our rehab department at Shriners and in the hospital in general, that we encourage the children to be as active as possible, to have stronger muscles and stronger bones, as you said, Rachel, as well. And very likely, if you have more solid bones, you're going to have less fractures. If you have less fractures, then you're going to be less immobilized. And if you're less immobilized, then you're going to remain active. So we're trying as much as possible to have the children in that positive circle of physical activity. Also, just a little word on hyperlaxity, and you mentioned it as well, Courtney. So hyperlaxity can be part of OI. So having ligaments that are a little bit looser than the average can cause some challenges in the legs and the arms and the spine. So having strong muscles can kind of compensate a little bit for those ligaments that are not doing their job at 100%. So muscle strengthening can help with alignment, joint stability, and also decreasing pain. You were talking about the lumbar lordosis, Courtney. So yeah, I give a lot of core strengthening exercises to even to the children. But yeah, talking about physical activity and fragile bone can raise some concerns. We want the children to be active, so they have all the benefits of physical activity, but we want to minimize the risk as much as possible. We want physical activity to be as safe as possible. So that can be done through a wise choices of physical activity, that can be done through choosing the proper equipment, that can be done through adapting the different activities. And this is going to be what I'm going to discuss during the rest of my little presentation. Okay, so when we talk about physical activity, we think about gym class. So this is questions that I have all the time. So general principles for gym class, general recommendations, is that everybody should participate in gym class, even if you have a special need, but some activities in sports might need to be adapted, and supervision might be necessary to ensure safety. So just to decrease the risk of falling, or to decrease the risk of bumping into the other students, or decrease the risk of getting a ball behind the head or behind the back. So sometimes we recommend one-on-one supervision during gym class for certain kids. And on this slide, I want to go really quickly with this slide. So this is what we see on the different websites talking about OI, and this is what we share with the patients as well. So no contact sports, no high impact repetitive activities like trampoline, horseback riding for the risk of compression fractures, no full sit up for the same reason, being careful with equipment on the floor that kids they could trip on, no jumping from a height, like jumping from a bench or a chair or gym equipment, for example. But I wanted to go quickly because I find that when we work with children with OI, we're pretty good at telling them everything that they cannot do and that they should not do. So I like that tonight we spend a little bit more time on ways to make physical activity possible and as safe as possible. So I have some general suggestion, and then I have some very concrete examples that were shared with me by some patients that I'm following. Okay, so suggestion to using some lighter equipment, like lighter badminton racket, for example, inflatable volleyball, using some foam balls for ball games. In gym class, some teachers, sometimes they're pretty good at dividing the group in smaller groups just to decrease the risk of being, the risk of collision between the kids, and also to have a safer environment. And if the child is unable to participate, we really try to guide the children to advocate for themselves, to explain their condition, explain their limitation, but also to explain what is it that they're able to do, and come up with ideas to modify the activities, come up with solutions to overcome the barriers. So we really try to encourage the children to be able to do that. And some of them, they become really, really good at it. You're going to see some very concrete example in the next slide. And if all the options have been explored and it's really not possible sometimes to participate safely in an activity in gym class, then the child could be the assistant of the teacher. So that could be his participation in gym class. So sometimes children can be, could be the ref, or they can be like counting the points. We really, really don't encourage, we really don't want children to be left out in gym class and just like sit on the side of the gym and not doing anything. Gym class is good for physical health, but we have to think about mental health as well, and self-esteem and inclusion and being part of that group. So we try as much as possible that children are not exempted from gym class, as much as possible. And now I love the very concrete examples. Rachel, that's interesting. You mentioned archery. There's a teenager boy that I'm following. He was telling me that in gym class, yeah, they were doing archery, but the bow was way too big for him to hold. Like it was way too heavy. He had a severe type of OI. So the gym teacher suggested that he would use a slingshot instead. And that worked like really, really well. He could do it like everybody else. Another teenager boy, they were playing badminton in gym class. And for him, they had decided that he would cover only half the size of the court, only half of the court, because he was not like running as fast as the other kids, and his balance was not as developed. So that made it fair for everybody. When you practice gymnastic, walking on the line instead of walking on a balance beam, you still practice your balance, but it's safer. And the last one, I also like that example. It's a little boy. He was in kindergarten or grade 1. Like, he was pretty young. He was telling me that they were playing tag at school, and so when he was playing, the tag would have a pool noodle to touch the other kids instead of touching them. So then the risk of falling would be less. And that child had an aide as well that was running around with him. But yeah, I didn't understand exactly how it worked, but well, there was some pool noodles involved in there for safety. And the picture that you see on the bottom right, so you can see that little bug rock climbing. So his class was going rock climbing, and everybody had a chance to try, even him, including him. So I love, actually, I love that picture. So schoolyard, so different ways to make the schoolyard safer so children can be active in the schoolyard. I've seen very, very often that the school, they would have a section that was reserved for more like quiet games. So kids, they could be like playing around. There was some games available, some toys games available, skipping ropes and stuff like that, but no crazy running, no like throwing balls. So then the child with OI could be playing in that special area, like in a safer way. Also, like children with OI, like they want to play on the playground equipment, but sometimes it's so crowded in there that it's a bit dangerous. So to have like a reserved time where the child could go with like 1 or 2 friends under supervision. I've seen that in some schools. Sometimes behind the schools, there's some hills and children, they go tobogganing. So with a family, we brainstorm how is it that their child could go tobogganing as well. And we came up with a recommendation that maybe he could toboggan, but only the second half of the hill under supervision, and in the section that it was like more flat, like not bumpy. That worked out really well, using bikes, tricycle during recess. A teenager girl, she was telling me that she put crampons over winter boots when it's icy, so it's safer. And the colorful hat, the neon hat, it came from that same little boy who was playing tag with the pool noodle. In the during recess, he's wearing a really colorful hat, so then his aide can follow him more easily, but also his friends can remember to be like a little extra careful with him. And he chose the hat himself. He loves it. Apparently, it's super cool. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture. I just took this one on internet, but having something just to remember that this child needs extra care. Okay, so that's a list of sports that children that I'm following at Shriners are playing. So swimming have been mentioned many times, synchronized swimming, Sophia and some other kids, biking, individual sports like racket sports, badminton, ping pong, pickleball. I haven't heard so far from teenagers, but maybe in the future. Archery, very popular, and Rachel, you mentioned it. Golf, dance. Lots of, especially little girls enrolled in ballet, juggling, hiking, brisk walking, some sports in wheelchair, and it's really not an exclusive list. Biking, I just want to mention some children are riding regular bikes, and some other children, like they have adapted tricycles. But sometimes children, they don't have enough balance, or they feel scared to ride a regular bike, but they don't want a big, huge adaptive tricycle, and they don't need sometimes a big, huge adaptive tricycle with the back seat and everything. So there's an in-between that exists. In Quebec, it's the company Trivel that does it. It's like big, how do you say? Sorry, English is my second language. It's like big training wheels that you can put on a regular bike. And I have a few teenagers using that, and they love it. So it's like I said, an in-between between a regular bike and an adapted bike. Stationary bikes are popular. There's some smaller models that exist that are designed usually for children with ADHD, for example, but they can be used by other populations as well. That's another popular one. And pedal exercisers that can be used with the arms or with the legs, and even like sitting in a wheelchair. They're cheaper, they're smaller than stationary bikes. So I know a few families that are using that. Swimming have been mentioned many times. And Rachel, it's interesting that you said weightlifting, because very often I have teenagers coming to me and they want me to convince their parents that they can go to the gym with their friends. And then they love me because I say yes. I say yes, but we talk about how is it that we can make going to the gym and doing some weightlifting as safe as possible. So once again, they have all the benefits of exercising, including going with their friends, while minimizing the risk. So I discuss with them starting with small weights and increasing very gradually the resistance. And when they use some resistance, to try to put it as close as possible to the joints, just to have some shorter lever arms, just so it's safer for the bones, to use body weight to exercise, some squats, some planks, some push-ups can be done. Being careful of torsion movements, which is the movement that is probably the most stressful for the bones, keeping in mind that vertebrae are fragile too. So I prefer if they do like planks or abdominal contraction with some leg movement, like double leg raises, for example, more than doing some full sit-ups or crunch that puts lots of stress on the vertebrae. And for the ones who have that hyperlordosis, so that increased curve in the lower back, I teach them how to correct it, so they learn to protect their back while they're exercising and even in their daily lives. And the last one, but probably the most important one, to listen to their body. And then everybody leaves the PT consult, everybody's happy, the parents are happy, the teenager is happy, most of the time. School, I just want to say we developed a tool to help with school inclusion of children with OI, so elementary school and high school. And there's a very nice section on physical activity. So there's some general recommendations, but also some recommendations with some tick box. So depending on the child, we can give some more like individualized recommendations. It's available in English or French. I would be happy to send you a copy, or you can find it on the website of the researcher who worked with us on that project. So that's really to work to really help with school inclusion, including gym class. And I just want to finish by saying a big thank you for organizing that webinar. It's mentioned in the literature, and we hear it all the time, that fear, like it can be a limiting factor for achieving the full potential of people with OI. Sometimes I hear children, they tell me, oh, I don't go to physio back home because my physio, she doesn't know about OI. I'm scared. Or sometimes they tell me, I don't go to physio back home because my physio doesn't know about OI. So she's scared and she doesn't have me do anything. So I'm wasting my time. And I can understand, like, it's a really rare condition. So I think education is part of the solution. So a big thank you for organizing that, so we can brainstorm together, exchange ideas, and learn from each other. Take home message: biphosphonates are good for bone health, but physical activity as well. So I'm prescribing physical activity to everybody tonight, the moms, the children. So any, I don't know if we go with questions now or at the end. It's really up to you. That's it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, we'll pause for a moment and just reflect on what you said there. I just loved your presentation, and I appreciated your final comment, because we hear that too, that the physiotherapists are scared to give recommendations, and you know, it's appropriate to know when you don't know, and have, you know, concerns about just coming out with recommendations if you're unsure. And certainly I think it's our responsibility to try to educate other physiotherapists so that they can become more comfortable with children and adults with OI. So appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us this evening, Corinne. I was really happy you talked about hyperlaxity, because that hadn't really come up yet. And certainly hyperlaxity is a feature of osteogenesis imperfecta. It's inherent to the condition, and it predisposes to fractures. If you're loose and you fall and you're already lax, you're going to deform bone more when you fall. And I think being active and strong and weightlifting is good for lax ligaments. So I'm glad that you raised that and addressed that. I thought your modifications of activities to give kids a way to participate, but in a modified way, was really great and creative. So thank you so much, Corinne. Annie, do you have any comments on what you heard this evening?
So, Corinne, I think it's just so creative what people have come up with, and actually seeing that list makes me want to do all those activities and be more active tomorrow. I'm just curious, the boy with the hat, I think that's fantastic. But at the same time, kids can be a bit mean on the playground. Did he ever feel stigmatized or teased by wearing that hat? Or have you heard from other families if they do have that extra visual cue, does that cause sometimes more damage to the mental health?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. With that little boy, like I say, he loved the hat, but he was like really young, like 6, 7 years old, but he loved it. He found it was like really cool. Like I say, he chose it himself. So for him, at his age, that was not an issue. Probably, maybe it's not going to be always the case. But yes, I've seen, like I have another, well, that I have another example. Um, Another little boy, he was around like 10 years old, something like that. It was suggested by his school or by his local team. I'm not too sure who suggested that he would walk around in the hallway and there would be a big sign like be careful or something like that, like or stop sign or like be careful, like on the walker. And he didn't want it to use it, but then like it was decided by the school. So then I got in contact with the school. I said, no, 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 no. We're going to put other things in place for him to be safe. So he can leave like 2 minutes before the bell so he can walk in the hallway when it's not crowded and he can go with a friend. And like we've put other things in place. So it's a really good question. I would never force a child to wear a red funky hat, but he loved it. So for him, that was good. So
Yeah.
far.
Thank you. Does anybody from the community have questions?
I had a question, Corinne. How would you recommend someone with severe OI even start off with like a light weightlifting regime?
Yeah. Well, there's always the principle in strengthening. So depending on your strength, you want to start with no gravity. Yeah? So that's not really like weightlifting, but depending on the strength that you have, maybe you just need to work with no gravity and then against gravity. And if you can do the full movement against gravity, then you want to add like a little weight. So I don't know if it answers your question a little bit. And then, yeah, you start with some very, very little ones. So there's the ankle weights. We have elastic that we can use, the dumbbells. Yeah, did we ever, I forget if we used some weights with Sophia in the past, and sorry, you don't need to answer. We're not going to discuss like.
No,
yeah,
we haven't yet. She had at home a little bit when she was younger. I had little 1 pound ones, and she would see me doing a routine and she'd kind of pick them up and like do a thing. She was almost stronger when she was younger just because she's been in this kind of pre-teen fracture cycle right now. Like she never used to have kind of spontaneous fractures like she does now. But obviously, like it kind of inspires me hearing all of it, that it is beneficial for, and especially for someone that's not kind of actively load bearing, and weight bearing, maybe kind of getting that, a bit of stress on the bones from lifting, even if it's something very simple and very light, just kind of starting maybe that repetition and that movement could maybe be beneficial.
I'm sure it would be beneficial. But also think like in her daily life, she's lifting up some stuff, eh? So for sure,
Right.
she's lifting up a cup, maybe it's a pound. So
Yeah.
okay, do it 10 times. For sure, she can do some little weight lifting here and there.
Right. You don't have to put as much kind of thought into it. It could be just daily, kind of everyday items.
Yeah.
Corinne, do you ever have families ask, oh, but they're too young to lift weights, and you hear that it stunts their growth, or that it's bad for a child or a teenager to lift weights? Do you ever get faced with those questions from parents?
Not with parents with children with OI. It's really the fear of fracture and yeah. So no, not that they're too young. It's more like they're fragile. Yeah, and there's also like there's two types of children, eh? The one that are how can I say like more scared and you want to push them, and the other ones that are I don't know the words in English, très téméraire, like they want to do a lot and you need to slow them down. So it's more those ones that the parents are a little bit scared to let them go to the gym. But then I tell the teenagers, prove to your parents that you can keep going to the gym. I mean, be reasonable, be mature. So not from parents with children with OI.
I think all this discussion about weightlifting is really interesting because studies have shown that it is muscle contraction that is a more powerful osteogenic stimulus than just passive loading of the weight. So every time you contract to do anything with or without weights, that's favorable to bone. And so I think this is a really interesting discussion here tonight, and hopefully will stimulate some individuals to think about incorporating some weight training into their lives. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Corinne before we go to our last speaker?
I was just going to mention.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
I'll go, Jen, because I've already talked a lot.
Oh, that's fine. No, I just remember at the OI conference this summer, actually, at the session we went to, Beth brought up kind of functional weightlifting, that working towards kind of a goal of what you want to achieve in your daily life. So I've really had that in the back of my mind with Carter, because she's like, okay, so if you want to be able to lift the laundry detergent up to pour it, you know, maybe start with an empty one and add a little bit of water, a little bit more until you get to where it's full. And it didn't really like click in that how important that was until he couldn't lift the pot of boiling water off the stove and go and drain it. And I was like, oh my gosh, now it makes so much sense, because I'm like, okay, 2 pounds or 3 pound weights is like kind of, I mean, he was doing some of that, but I didn't think about the fact that he couldn't lift a pot of water off the stove to go drain it. So right now it's kind of like adapting that to make it work, or we're using smaller amounts, but I thought that was kind of neat. So just wondering what your take on that would be.
I wasn't in that session, unfortunately. I don't think I was in that session. Maybe I was in a different session, or I think I was playing with the kids in the.
Oh, we were in Omaha for that one. That was an Omaha one. Yeah.
Not the one, not the original day in Montreal.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's really true. All the time we have kids, I cannot do that, I cannot do that. Okay, so how is it that we're gonna get there? So the principle of small steps. No, I love the idea, and that was a really concrete example, and it shows again how important it is to strengthen the muscles for everybody.
Right. It started out with like the milk jug, because I just started buying smaller milk jugs, and I didn't even realize I wasn't buying the big 4-liter ones anymore because he couldn't do it. Right. So I had gone to buying like the 1-liter ones and going and buying milk way more often, because that's the one he could do. And so it's like, oh, maybe we should be thinking about like, and that's fine if that's what he's going to end up being able to do. But it's like, okay, that kind of makes a bit of sense. And then also I want to say, instead of the red hat, what we used to do with Carter at baseball is he had a C on his shirt. So the opposing team knew, if you're going to tag him, like, don't be rough tagging him out, because he thought he was the captain of the team. And they all knew that meant that was the kid. That's Carter. He has a Y, but he literally never knew that that's why he had a C on his shirt. But we just felt like it was almost our responsibility to let the other team know, like, hey, this is only fair for you to understand that if somebody mows this kid down, he's probably going to get really hurt. And a lot of the adults could tell his running was not exactly the same as everybody else's, but the kids needed that visual sign. And so it was something he was okay with, and it worked for us. So
That's cute. That's a great story. C for captain, C for Carter. I love it.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, this is something also that we do with our sport medicine teenagers. When they go back to sport after an injury, they have a special jersey just to see, okay, be careful. This player is injured, be extra careful. So it's a little bit the same principle, to take care of each other and be careful of each other. Yeah.
A lot of really great points coming out. Very, concrete recommendations and guidance and experience this evening. I just love it. We're going to turn it over to Jess Buffam now. Jessica, we call her Jeff. Jess graduated from Glasgow Caledonian University in 2018. She then worked in the UK as a pediatric physiotherapist for 2 years, and she has specialized in hydrotherapy. So I'm loving this theme of swimming, including in severe osteogenesis imperfecta, and I think that's a graduate, isn't it, of hydrotherapy. So this is going to be interesting to hear Jess speak. She's currently working as a physiotherapist in the community with a special interest in hydrotherapy and bone health. She also works at CHIO as part of my group. So I hired Jess a couple of years ago now to function as a multidisciplinary patient navigator in the spirit of helping families find PT, OT, and mobility device support close to home. We often centralize our services for rare bone diseases, but something like physical activity or physiotherapy needs to be integrated into the lifestyle of the individual. So we hired Jess to really work with the families to find a clinic close to home so it could be better integrated into their lifestyle, and also to empower the physiotherapist who's local to understand the child or the adult, and thereby be more comfortable delivering a PT or rehab service. So we've really enjoyed working with Jess. She's empowered our clinic as a multidisciplinary patient navigator, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the adult experience and capitalize on some of the concepts that Rachel discussed and take that narrative further. So Jess, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Leanne, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I also have a bit of a PowerPoint prepared. I think some of it I'll probably skim through just after hearing everyone's wonderful stories and Corinne talk. Not a lot, but things I was going to cover have already been covered, and just to be cognizant of time and everyone wanting to get on with their evening, may skip a couple things. So I'm just going to open up my PowerPoint here. All right. So now to start, just before I get going, I want to say that I did do some researching for this as well. And that as many of you have already aware, and this topic's come up over and over again, in the research, not all types of OI are equally represented, especially those with type 3 OI, just because it's such a small population in an already very small population. And on top of that, because of that, I guess, there's not a ton of research out there already, as we've talked about. So if some of the stuff I'm saying you feel just doesn't quite fit in with you and your family or your children or partners, then that's fine as well, because the big thing with OI and physical activity on our health journeys is it's not a cookie cutter approach. We've learned that over and over again, that one size is not fits all. And especially with such rare diseases, you really want a highly individualized program. So I'm really hoping that with the stuff I'm talking about tonight, for those that want a bit more information on physical activity or being physically active as adults, that you're going to find some stuff that resonates with you and motivates you to be possibly a bit more physically active, or inspires you, or just gives you that confidence to get out there a little bit more. So I think a lot of this we've talked about the differences between the kids with OI and then as we get into the adult population. The big thing I want to talk about here is that we have higher life demands. So I mean, I hear this over and over again every day in the clinics I work in, often because the people I'm working with at this point are in pain and injured, but aging can suck sometimes. And adding onto that the stress of our jobs, work, our jobs, chores, responsibilities, pregnancy and raising children and everything else. So it puts a lot more demand on us, and hence that can be a bit more of a burden to our OI as well. Some of the big things that to remember with adults as well is that there is evidence of having smaller bones, lower bone strength, and smaller muscle density as well than that of people in the general population. And also a bit more evidence of having more systematic joint and soft tissue injuries and conditions as well, as we've talked about too. So I think it's important to note with this that when talking about adults with OI and that of the general population, it's really hard to do this, but try not to compare yourself to your peers, family, friends, or other people out in the community. Set your own goals when it comes to being physically active, and just don't beat yourself up too much or give yourself a hard time when we're having, a bad OI episode and things slide a little bit, or you just can't keep up with those around you. Take a little time out and give yourself a bit of a chance to find your own way and set your own goals with that. I'm not going to talk too much about the research, but in all of my hunting around, I came across two studies that I think have some pretty powerful information in them. So one came out of the UK, and it was a bit of a cross section from a study called Rudy. And what came out about the population in this one is that 25% of those with OI type 1 had lower physical function and mobility to those in the general population. All the OI population in this study had higher levels of fatigue. So they were facing a lot more fatigue than those in the general population. And then some cool things within the OI population itself is that actually the number of fractures in childhood did not necessarily correlate with their ability as adults to become physically active, their physical performance, their pain and fatigue. And I think actually Rachel highlighted that a bit with her 28 fractures, and she's lifting weights and everything, which is really awesome. And again, as we've talked about, that not all types of OI are considered equal. The big findings come out of this is that exercise was the only strategy that really benefited all our body systems and gave us the support we needed. And that it also had the capacity to give us some fatigue and pain relief as well. So I think this kind of nails home the message that it's really key for adults with OI to try, if they can, to build a bit of regular exercise into their routine. Another study out of Switzerland I really liked was one that was run over 5 years. And basically what happened there is there was a multidisciplinary meeting every year. So they called it an OI day, and they had all these wonderful professionals gather together and do, imaging, blood work, investigations. And each year of those 5 years, they provided individualized plans and advice for the people in the study. So there was about 50 people in it. It was adults and kids, but most of the population was adults. And over the course of those 5 years, 62% of participants that were not physically active became routinely physically active, and 44% that were not managed to join sport-related activities. And the one that I really liked, and I think will hopefully mean a bit more to some of the people here tonight based on the speakers I've heard, is that there was 9 participants with OI type 3. And at the start of the study, there was 3 of them doing sport activities, and that doubled in 6 over the course of the 5 years. So unfortunately, we don't seem to have anything like this really in Canada or even Ontario for the adult population, but it gives us an idea of, with the proper support and maybe establishing your own wellness team, your own support system, what can be achieved. And a big part of that system doesn't have to be, but could be a physiotherapist. There's quite a few studies that show that for those with OI as adults, getting physiotherapy early on can help lessen the impact of symptoms on quality of life, and often decrease risk of fractures. So I want to talk a little bit more about the wellness team. There's lots of people that can be part of it. We've already talked about physiotherapists, but actually something Dr. Ward and I were talking about the other day, and that there seems to start to be murmurings about, and little bit of research out there about it, is having a mentor. So having someone else with the condition that's maybe a bit older than you, that you can talk to and look up to and get some guidance from when you get really stuck with some components of OI. In terms of physiotherapy, so kids are very resilient, not saying adults are not, but you see, they go through all these fractures and they get up and keep going. We're still doing like activities and everything with fractures, especially those with rods. So for adults, not that we're not resilient, but sometimes we just need a little extra help. So physiotherapist is quite easy to access, which is why they're a great member to have on your wellness team. can be expensive, but sometimes you can get coverage through the government, through OHIP to see a bit of physio, and quite often our insurance plans have pretty reasonable coverage for this. So it's not necessarily something you're seeing every week or twice a week, and you can also get help from kinesiologists or personal trainers as long as they have a good knowledge in this area. But the nice thing about physio is that you kind of can keep yourself feeling well through the cycle. So you can do prevention. So if you know you have surgery coming up, so as we age, especially those with OI are more likely to maybe need joint replacements, again, way down the road. But doing a bit of physical activity before that or any other surgeries and doing some physiotherapy can help our outcomes with that. After fractures, injuries, or surgeries, doing a bit of rehab just to make sure we've gotten everything balanced out and strengthened back up again, and we're not letting our body cheat or move in a funny way to protect something still. As soon as problems start to come up, not waiting for it to be, breaking into your everyday life, but as soon as a little bit of a niggle or an issue comes up, having someone you go to help with that, and if possible, engaging in maintenance programs. So, seeing your physio, if you have a good relationship with them, every month or every couple months, or even just once a year to just check in, make sure things are going well. Physical activity can come in all different forms, which is kind of established, and there's a bit cut out for every person. We've talked about how great staying physically active is for our bones, especially that strength training. Biggest difference we haven't really talked about in adults is the stronger our muscles are, the less pressure there is on our joint. So it can help maintain our joint integrity, putting off things like osteoarthritis, which is just a lot of wear and tear in that joint, and hopefully decreasing our need for joint replacements, or at least pushing it off into later in life. As well, staying physically active has a really big impact on our quality of life, as we've already talked about. A couple key ones that are maybe a bit different than when we're kids is the mental alertness. So as we age, even after we retire, we want to do something that's helped keeping us stimulated and keeping our acuity up, and physical activity can help with that, as well as disease prevention. So not that children can't have these conditions, but heart disease, some cancers, diabetes are all more prevalent in adult years, and staying physically active can help with this, as well as some of the lung capacity issues that we were talking about earlier as well. Now, this is a bit of a hard one for me, because what the research is saying is that actually what is recommended in terms of physical activity is the same for the OI population as it is for the general population. And these are standards set out by the Government of Canada as well as the World Health Organization. That being said, it's not going to be the exact same for everyone. But I want to touch on these guidelines a little bit so you can have a bit of an idea of what being physically active can mean or should mean in terms of getting our body systems moving. So it recommends doing 150 minutes of physical activity a week, which works out to 30 minutes 5 times a week. You want to be doing this physical activity in at least 10-minute intervals. So keeping moving for at least 10 minutes. And you want that physical activity to be moderate intensity. So, getting a little bit warm, maybe a little bit sweaty, that breathing and heart rate is starting to come up, but you can still hold up a conversation, would be that moderate activity. And vigorous activity is, hard to breathe, heart's working, lungs are working, we're getting sweaty, and we're getting breathless and working our body. I would say typically moderate intensity is probably the best place to be. Nothing wrong with vigorous, but I really like moderate intensity physical activity for my patient population, as well as doing 2 strengthening sessions a week, which we've already covered quite a bit. The core, arms and legs, all those big muscle groups getting targeted. when appropriate, especially if we're having active fractures at the time. And that actually, as we get into our later adult years, we want to be engaging in some balance activities as well. There's also something called the 24-hour movement guidelines, which, just adding into that physical activity, recommend when possible. We're limiting the amount we're sedentary throughout the day. So that doesn't necessarily mean, if you're in a chair, you shouldn't be in your wheelchair all day, but maybe getting something like a wobble cushion or something you can sit on that can engage your core and get you wiggling, moving a little bit, or just getting our arms moving or something while we're sitting throughout the day to help with that, and also getting a good night's sleep. Now, I know the big hot topic is what is safe and what isn't. So we touched a bit on, the things that we really should be avoiding generally across the board. We've talked about actually all of these already, so I won't go through them again. But the things we do want to think about in terms of what is safe is going to be different for each person. It's highly individualized, but your categories you want to think about are, your age, what your risk is fractures at the minute, what already your pain and fatigue and stamina levels are, how your joint and muscles are doing. So apart from the bone injuries, we haven't talked much about the soft tissue injuries or joint injuries we can get. How are we holding up in that area? And most importantly, what interests you and what are your goals and desires to get out of physical activity? Because when it interests you, it's A, easier to do, and B, you'll be more engaged and less likely to be injured. We've talked a bit about all the different types to be physical, the different types of activity we've already mentioned quite a bit. And what's nice, I think we talked about this too, but things like Tai Chi and yoga can be done in a chair as well. In the much older population, there's also fall prevention classes, which again can be done in a chair too, which is quite nice. 3 of these activities I kind of wanted to touch on the pros, the good things about them, and a bit of the risks from them as well. So we've already talked lots about swimming, water activities, and the great attributes those have. Again, there is still risks involved. You need to be comfortable in water for one. Not everyone is. And there's always still that risk of slipping on the deck or in the change rooms and injuring there. Pickleball, which is the new one, and it's funny, like so many of my young patients, even in their 20s and 30s, have started taking this up as well. I think I've actually even had maybe one teenager that was into it. Oops, sorry guys. So another one where, again, it's dynamic, it's good for mobility and balance, but we do want to watch those, quick, jerky, twisting motions, the amount of running we're doing, and the risk of falling with that as well. And finally, Pilates, which we talked about, is great, especially of those with lower back pain, as we've already chatted quite a bit about as well. One, I guess, risk or downside with that, or the two, are that it's not a huge cardiovascular benefit to that. And you may have to be getting up and down off the ground or off equipment, which can be challenging for some in their later years. Strengthening and loading, it might not be, it's a lot of body weight stuff, which is great for some population, or very, very low weights I've seen. And actually, I was talking to someone in one of my patients, and actually some of the Pilates clinics in Ottawa actually have ones that are specifically targeted for bone strengthening as well, which is pretty cool. For those in a wheelchair, we've talked about a couple of these things. So if we're interested in pool, call the local pools and check. Most of them will have a hoist, a way to easily get in the water, and someone trained to use it. A lot of the big cities will also have neuro gyms. So it's often associated with a physiotherapy center, but it can be a gym you can get a membership to, which has equipment designed for using while you're in a wheelchair. There's lots of great stuff you can do at home as well. So some of the gaming programs like the Wii, and I think actually the Switch as well, have like remote stuff that you can do in activities, Wii Sport and whatnot on the television from your home if you're not feeling confident enough to be out at a gym. Xbox Connect also has tons of movement stuff you can do, and there's actually a program for it called Gymtronics, which is a rehab program, and it makes like activities really fun. it's used a lot for kids, but actually I quite enjoy doing some of them. Like you're riding a motorcycle and you have to lean to get that core strength working. And there's lots of online virtual stuff now that offer live and recorded classes that are appropriate to do in a wheelchair, as well as or in a chair, or just exercising from home. And there's tons of new kind of cool equipment, like the picture on the right-hand side there that can be used to just help you do those exercise programs at home. To finish up here, I just want to talk about how you can make things safer. So any kind of physical activity, there's always going to be a little bit of a risk, especially if you're already at a high risk of fracture and injury, but make sure you have a fracture plan in place. We've talked about establishing that wellness team, but make sure you have someone that's responsible for your care, that can help, get you x-rays and everything right away and wherever it is you're living. If you are participating in activities, make sure those in charge of them know about your conditions. And a big thing is listen to your body. So exercise is exhausting, and it should be exhausting. It should be hard work. But when you're getting really tired, you maybe want to slow things down a little bit, because when we're overtired and we push through, it can sometimes be when we're more likely to injure. And make sure you enjoy what you do. If you enjoy it, if you're balancing that enjoyment and safety, you're less likely to be injured because you're going to be more engaged. Found some really helpful research. The Osteogenesis Imperfecta Foundation has so much great stuff on their site about exercise and activity. I'm sure everyone here is well aware of that already. And that's it for me. So thank you all for listening. And I just want to say thanks to my team as well that's helped me out a bit with this too.
Wow, Jess, that's incredible. The wellness team concept, I really, really enjoyed hearing about that. And just thinking about some of those video games you can do at home. Ring Fit Adventure is a really fun one. It's with Nintendo Switch, and you have a ring, and you can really use your arms to push and have some nice muscular bone interaction. So I don't have any stocks with that game. I think it's a good one. I do have one question. I know you're not supposed to do horseback riding, but a lot of patients do hippotherapy. So I just wanted to know, Corinne or Jess, your thoughts on that, especially in the face of a vertebral compression fracture. Some children I've seen are disappointed because they can't do it if they were doing it. So I just wanted to know your thoughts surrounding hippotherapy.
I'll maybe say a couple things, and then I'll let Corinne add in her bit as well, because she may have a little bit more on this than me. The hippotherapy I've seen has been very, very slow and gentle, so very slow. It's more about actually like that movement of the horse in a very slow, controlled setting. And that sway building up, core strength and very gentle loading. So I think in that capacity, it can be very helpful. But I would always make sure if you're going to a place like that, that they are aware of that condition, the people that are doing the instructing. So where I trained in the UK, it was actually a physiotherapy course that you took in a junction. So you had to be really well trained to be an instructor in proper therapy for that. So I would say it's definitely a possibility, but make sure the team you're working with does have awareness, and they'll tell you they don't want anyone getting injured either. So they're going to tell you if they think that it's safe at their facility or not.
I don't have much to add. Yeah, it's really like the running and the galloping that we don't want. But I mean, a child could go on a horse and do some gentle horseback riding or hippotherapy. That's, once again, it's risk benefits, making wise choices.
And if they have compression fractures, would you still allow that, or would you think it's best to take a little pause?
Well, if they're in pain, maybe it's best that they take just like a little pause and then they can restart. So I would go as tolerated.
As tolerated. Great.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions from the audience?
Can I ask a question to Jessica?
Mm-hmm.
Can I? From the pediatric physiotherapist to the adult physiotherapist? Am I allowed to do that? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you have sometimes some adults with OI telling you, oh, I wish I would knew that as a child. I wish my pediatric physiotherapist would have told me that. What is it that I can learn from you? Because after 21, I don't have much, I don't know much what's going on with those people with OI.
Yeah, I would say it does come up sometimes, but it's not necessarily, oh, I wish they had told me that. I get a lot of the adult population just being like, "Ah, you know what? I didn't necessarily take my therapy as seriously or my maintenance as seriously as I should have." Because when you're feeling great, like who wants to do this kind of stuff every day, all the time, unless it's your passion. So I think it's more, oh, I wish I would have maybe been more aware of what it looks like down the road, and that, you don't want to scare your pediatric population like they're about to go off to university and get jobs and do exciting things. And you don't want to be like, well, just so you know, in your 50s, if you don't pay attention, all these things can go wrong. But I think maybe just giving them a bit more awareness and make sure that they know we're so well supported in the children population, making sure they know that when they're adults, that sometimes you're gonna have to advocate a bit more for yourself. And with a rare disease, um, those in the adult population don't always know a ton about it. So making sure that you have the information on your condition to share, or, the information of the healthcare professionals that know your condition, that those in the community that can reach out to that aren't as well educated.
That's very useful. Thank you.
Yes, and Corinne both, how can we together help empower community physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and mobility device experts to really understand why? I mean, we're in this climate where we want to empower rare across Canada, rare bone disease, rare other diseases. How are we going to reach these clinics? We know that the physiotherapists, et cetera, are very well intentioned. They want to help. But if you've never helped and cared for a patient with OI, where are you going to start to get the information that you need? Do you guys have any suggestions as we go into this sort of, landscape?
Yeah, that's another really good question. From a personal point of view, when I have children coming from some other provinces or countries where they're the only one with OI in the whole town, I always tell them, please tell your physiotherapist to contact me. We can do a Teams meeting or we can talk on the phone. So I try to, as much as possible, to do like one-on-one education like that. Um, I'm very happy with the webinar tonight. I think there's lots and lots of information on the different websites as well. And more, there's some OI foundations a little bit everywhere also for support and exchanging information. So that's really, really good. We've seen in the different countries, in South America, Africa, like they share information. So this is great. So we try to be in contact as much as possible with those different foundations and provide education when possible. But yes, like I said, personally, I always offer it to speak with those therapists who have less experience and interested to learn about OI.
Yeah.
For your question, but this is...
Sorry, just to add in, I think a really key thing, because as I'm a community physio as well, so I work in a small town clinic as well as the hydrotherapy clinic. And one thing I found, I know I'm pretty thorough at reading all their intake paperwork, but on the referrals, if you're writing, if you have questions, go to this resource or contact this person. That's actually how Dr. Ward and I met. She had that on all of her referrals, and I called every time. So having someone to reach out to, because it's so hard. You're not going to be able to teach everyone everything about something so rare. It's just not going to stay front of mind when there's so many bigger things. So like I said before, teaching our patients to actually self-advocate and be able to point their healthcare professionals in the right direction, because it is a rare disease, is going to be key, as well as for us as healthcare professionals on referrals, offering either resources or contact information so that they can reach out to you, which is actually a big role of what I'm doing in Dr. Ward's clinic, is guiding physios. So I've given guidelines and ideas for hydrotherapy and help them develop exercise programs, as well as just giving guidelines to some of the clinics in terms of what this disease looks like, some things they maybe need to be cautious of and watch for.
Can I add to that?
Yeah,
I
please.
would. I totally agree with Jess in that, unfortunately, in the rare disease community, you are often your own expert. So certainly, if the therapist can reach out to someone like the team at CHEO, the Strong Clinic, or someone from Shriners, that would be optimal. But just knowing yourself or your child or what those needs are is really helpful. Like, I never tell anyone I'm a healthcare professional when I walk into a room with my child initially, and let them kind of like show me what they know. I have called major physiotherapy clinics, pediatric clinics here in our city, and I've talked to a physio that said, let me call my malpractice insurer and see what they say. That's not the right way to lead that conversation. So we don't see them clearly. But I think sometimes we have to kind of like be our own advocates or guide them, our therapists, in that way. Like, what would you do with an 85-year-old osteoporotic patient with fragility fractures? What would you suggest for them in terms of, and not that everyone with OI is like an 85-year-old, obviously, but just get them in the thought process of thinking, like, what do you like? I think sometimes having the rare disease title like scares healthcare providers, but a lot of physios are used to working with people with fragility issues, and there's a lot of overlap of what's appropriate for those patients. So they get scared off by the title, and then they don't even want to do anything, right?
Yeah, and Rachel, you led with that. You said that when you were building your weight training program, you sought a personal trainer, I believe, or physiotherapist that had expertise in elderly fitness, right?
Yeah.
So that's exactly what you implemented. I thought that was genius.
It was the only thought I had. I was not sure what else to do. So
Fine. We did the same this summer with our local YMCA. The classes that run during the day tend to be like for the elderly population. So we did chair aerobics, and she could do that in her wheelchair. And at first, she wasn't super keen because she said it was just going to be her and the grannies, and she didn't want to go being 11. But I said, well, I'm going to go with you, and we're going to make it fun. And, and then she could do all those exercises in her chair, or the, like the aqua fitness, which tends to be, the older ladies as well. And, we would do that. So things that were kind of geared towards the elderly population. And Jess, in your talk, I was so happy you mentioned like the Wii Sports, because that was something I totally forgot about. Like, we do the Wii Sports, and is it the Just Dance one on the Wii, which is incredible. And she like works up a sweat and doesn't even realize she's getting cardio and doing stuff. And I kind of, when she was a bit stronger and doing some active weight bearing, I would get her to stand in her walker and do it so that she was actually standing and kind of doing the Wii Sports. But yeah, kind of all of those things. And when you mentioned Tai Chi, I thought Sophia actually did kickboxing years ago, which sounds really funny because she's so fragile, but I was involved in kickboxing for years, and she wanted to come with me. And so she would just, she would kick the pad with her little foot, and I got her tiny boxing gloves, and she would do like the slightest little punches into the pad. And I mean, she wasn't doing a whole lot, but she was moving her body, and she felt involved and included, and she was getting some movement. And so, yeah, a lot of things can be modified, I guess.
One thing we say often in therapy, that I think it's a bit cheesy, but it's really true. Motion is lotion. Just get out, get moving. And, as you build that confidence, you can start to set bigger goals and harder goals. Like we said, the building up the weight slowly, start really small. Just get moving, however that is that makes you happy.
I love that. Motion is lotion. I haven't heard that before, but it's brilliant. Yeah, and I really love the concept that you and Jennifer and others have raised about building functional capacity. If you're gearing up for the teapot, you start with the small carton of milk, and then the bigger carton of milk, and then the bigger, and then eventually. So I've heard a lot of really creative ideas tonight. I've heard about pickleball. I've heard about artistic swimming and severe OI. I've heard about the importance of a wellness team and working with individuals who are sensitive to aging and thinking about how that might adapt to the bone fragility setting. So you folks have, really taken it upon yourselves as a community to figure out your path, haven't you? And you've individualized it for your family and your child, and you've sought the guidance of other healthcare professionals, and you've dug deep into your own knowledge and brought that forward. So, as usual, the Canadian OI Society is very inspiring in terms of its membership, and we so appreciate that you've taken the time to share with us your thoughts this evening. It's been really great. We've recorded a lot here in terms of ideas and experiences, and I think this is going to be very useful to the community. And so with that, anybody have any final thoughts they'd like to share before we sign off to the informal part of the evening? We have about 10 minutes left to go informal, but any last words of wisdom or thoughts? Annie, do you want to have the last word?
I just want to thank you all for including me this evening at this webinar. I'm actually really, really inspired by each and every one of you and your stories or your children's stories and all the creative ways you've been able to adapt so that kids can be kids, or you can be who you want to be without feeling that you're set back. Because I think everyone has the right to reach their full potential, no matter what challenges you may face. So I'm just so humbled to be here. So thank you.
No, thanks, Annie. And so great to hear, the adult voice. I loved how you spoke this evening about the responsibilities of an adult, right? Your job, parenting, all the responsibilities of life on top of dealing with OI, either in yourself or in your child. And, you're truly a resilient community. And I, like you, am humbled by what I've heard tonight and inspired by it, and just really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you this evening. So thank you, everyone. I look forward to the next time that we can all be together again, talking about some interesting topic. And I'm just going to close the formal part of the evening and stop the recording and wish you all well, and we can move to the informal part of the evening. So thank you very much.